So many people greatly enjoyed and got an ample amount of value from the video I did covering the $2 trillion stimulus package that passed in the US. But then more talks of new stimulus packages started to amplify, and then people started asking me to cover this proposal by Democrats. And if you haven't seen that video yet where I did cover the $2 trillion stimulus package, the link will be down below in the description. So as we know, the CARES Act, or the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, provided Americans with some small sense of financial relief with a $1,200 stimulus check and a bunch of other proposals and legislation put in there as well. But as that program is rolling out, it's becoming more and more apparent to lawmakers that Americans need a lot more relief than just a small check that would, for most people, barely make a dent in any of their living expenses. So there's currently several proposals out there by lawmakers that would provide Americans with more ongoing financial support. So now you could add this proposal of the automatic boost to communities, or the ABC Act proposal, which was introduced by Congresswomen Rashida Tlaib and Pramila Jayapal, to the list. So if this act is proposed, this would provide every single American with a $2,000 preloaded debit card or a boost card, and it would give them $2,000 preloaded on that card that they can use anywhere, anytime, for anything. And the card would be reloaded with $1,000 each month until 1 year after the end of the COVID-19 crisis. This would help those who are unbanked or do not have access to check cashing services. So who would be eligible for this new legislation that would propose a $2,000 stimulus check, or a card in this case, and a $1,000 recurring payment? So the goal of this bill is to categorically leave no one behind. And so the bill would provide a $2,000 prepaid debit card to everyone, including taxpayers, dependents, non-citizens, individuals who do not have a bank account, social security number, or permanent address, and people living in unincorporated territories or protectorates, and Americans living abroad. And you'd also be qualified for these funds if you smash that like button, give that video a big thumbs up. It just helps with the YouTube algorithm so that more people could see videos just like this and get value from it. So as far as dependents, the proposal gives an example of a family with 4 dependents being eligible to receive a prepaid debit card for each taxpayer and each dependent. For example, a couple with 2 children would receive 4 debit cards at $2,000 each, for a grand total of $8,000 for that family. And when it comes to non-citizens, this would include permanent residents, undocumented individuals, and temporary visitors whose stay exceeds 3 months. And again, these cards would be reloaded automatically with $1,000 every single month until 1 year after the emergency ends. Now, the U.S. Treasury would work with other agencies to develop a comprehensive list. The goal is to provide relief for everyone, and so they want to make the broadest list of recipients possible. So this would include working with the IRS, or the Internal Revenue Service, the SSA, or the Social Security Administration, the Federal Election Commission, or the FEC, and every other relevant federal, state, and local government agency, including state-level DMVs. So how would this money be distributed? So these funds would be distributed via a U.S. debit card in a program managed by the U.S. Treasury. And these prepaid U.S. debit cards would be distributed via direct mail, in-person pickup, or at-risk outreach. Any and all individuals with an address on file with a government agency would have cards sent to them to that address via the USPS, or the United States Postal Service. Now, in-person pickup would apply to people who do not have a permanent address, and people who are not permanent residents, undocumented individuals, and temporary visitors whose stay exceeds 3 months. And at-risk outreach would apply to those who are disabled, homeless, elderly, or live in remote areas. So as far as these funds being used, you can use these funds in stores, online, or you can also actually withdraw that cash from an ATM. And cardholders would also have the ability to top up their balances at any time, either during or after the crisis. But at the end of the day, the only question that we have is, how much will this cost and where is that money coming from? So this ABC Act would be paid with 2 $1 trillion coins. Yes, you heard me right, that is actually a $1 trillion coin. This is an actual, real, legit thing that's tangible. The $1 trillion coin is a concept that emerged during the United States debt ceiling crisis in 2011 as a proposed way to bypass any necessity for the United States Congress to raise the country's borrowing limit. And this is through the minting of very high value platinum coins. This reached national headlines during the first week of January 2013, but ended up being ultimately rejected by the Federal Reserve and the Treasury. However, this concept of a $1 trillion coin is now being reintroduced. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib is bringing back this proposal to mint these extremely expensive coins. And on top of that, additional coins would be minted as needed, and this is all coming directly funded from the Treasury. Title 31 of the U.S. Code gives the Treasury Secretary the authority to mint and issue platinum bullion coins. And you can see this, it's an actual law written in. And with these proposals, if you haven't noticed, the price of Bitcoin has been booming, but you know, OG fans would know how I feel about Bitcoin, you could see a video I did a long time ago about why I would never even put 1 cent into Bitcoin. I had a couple dollars into Bitcoin a long time ago, but I would never ever put any portion of my net worth into Bitcoin. I'll link that video down below. It's an old video. I go well into depth and rail against Bitcoin. Crypto has been rising because this proposal would actually call for a digital currency system by the year 2021. This proposal would outline the possibility of using the infrastructure behind the US debit card system to create a, quote, digital public currency wallet system, or a digital currency based on the US dollar. Now, whether that currency would ultimately be Bitcoin or some other variation of it issued by the US government is unknown. But these numbers are sounding eerily familiar if you remember Democratic candidate for the presidency, Andrew Yang. Yang called for UBI, or Universal Basic Income, of $1,000 a month for every single American 18 and over. Now, this idea is a bit different under these circumstances. However, Yang's vision is starting to strike a chord with Americans and lawmakers alike. He made it quite far into the Democratic field. However, a small voter turnout for him led to the campaign's demise. Now, his idea of UBI, or Universal Basic Income, was suggested as a way to offset job loss from automation, artificial intelligence, and rising technology, as he called it, the next industrial revolution. And this would have been done in large part by implementing a 10% VAT, or value-added tax, to goods and services. He would have also taxed large corporations like Amazon and Google a lot more heavily in order to pay for this kind of UBI. Now, his idea would have been more on a permanent basis unless some president came in and revoked it, but this would be a temporary basis where it would only last until 1 year after the pandemic. Now, the proposal sounds good, but remember, this has to go into law. A bill has to become a law. So let's go back to middle school for a second and recognize that all laws in the United States started as some sort of a bill or legislation proposal. So in order for a bill to become a law, it has to pass the US House of Representatives, the US Senate, and the president. So let's just take a quick look of the journey from bill to law in the US. First, the bill begins. It begins by an idea, perhaps proposed by a citizen like yourself or a representative in Congress. Now, if you have an idea, you can contact your representatives in your district, and good luck hearing back from them, let alone it becoming a law in the United States. So if the representatives agree, they research the ideas and write them into bills. Now it's time for the bill to be proposed, so a representative will write it up, but the bill needs a sponsor. So the representatives will talk with other representatives in hope that they would get on board with it and have their support in addition. So once the bill has a sponsor and some representatives have the support of it as well, then it's time for it to be introduced. A bill clerk will then assign it a number with HR preceding it, and then it will be presented to all the representatives in the House. The House Speaker, which is Nancy Pelosi right now, would then send it off to one of the House standing committees. Once the bill reaches the committee will then revise, research, and review this until they decide whether or not to send it back to the House. Then the bill has to get reported, it will get debated about, and then the House will then hold a vote on that bill. If the majority of the representatives say yes, it then goes off to the Senate. It will go through essentially the identical procedures that went on in the House, and then if the Senate votes on it and the majority agree, it will then go to the president for him to sign. Now, the president has three choices at this point. He could sign and pass the bill, and then it would become law. He could refuse to sign it, and then the bill would get what's called vetoed, and then it would go back to the House floor. Or the president could do nothing, which is called a pocket veto, and then after 10 days, if Congress is in session, the bill will automatically become law. So if the bill passes the House and the Senate, and it has its approval from the president, or if that veto is overridden, it will then become into law and enforced by the government. So this is quite some steps that this bill would have to go through, and I doubt Trump would ever sign this, being it is proposed by House Democrats. Perhaps if Republicans had a modified version, maybe the president would be interested, but otherwise this will probably never happen, so don't get your hopes up. Trillions have already been spent, and this would end up being the second highest relief package ever signed into law, the first of course being that $2 trillion stimulus package. So while $2,000 and another $1,000 a month sounds great and splendid, I would not count on this by any means. And that's not to say that more stimulus packages will not be passed. There's already been a ton of funding and proposals and legislation that have already been signed into law. However, this one particularly will come with a very sizable price tag and seems very unlikely. I could be wrong, but if this ever did pass, this would be an unprecedented shift towards digital currency, as well as a move towards universal basic income. The Yang Gang and the hashtag huddle people would be beside themselves if this ever did pass. I'm curious to know your thoughts on this proposal. Tell me down in the comments below. And also tell me if you think that this would help your financial situation Would this help you out? Would it make a dent in anything? And how is your life going right now? Are you doing well? Are you in a better position? Are you worse off? I wanted to hear it all down below. Tell me down below in the comments. But I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, be sure to give it a big thumbs up, smash that like button. And if you'd like to see more videos from my channel, I post videos every single week covering business, finance, entrepreneurship, mindset, strategy, and tips and tricks from my own experience. And if you'd like to be notified every single time I upload a new one so that you're first in line to see it before anyone else, be sure that you click that notification bell as well so that we're notified every single time I make a new video. See you in the next one.